Okay, what you'll learn in this session, you'll actually get the answer to what is an agent. I've shared a little bit of it on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it now. But the main thing there is like there's just a lot of confusion and a lot of like what is an agent, who's building agents. Like I think we've sort of lost the plot on the word. I usually don't like words like this, but I've learned because of AI to come around to words. So there's a couple words here that like I wasn't into, including the word agent, and now I am into because we need language for this stuff, and I want to help everyone understand the language. So that's like the main piece of this, to be honest, is like and get the answer to the question of what an agent actually is. And then I think there's a whole bunch of stuff that we get to learn on top of that, which is what makes it effective, how does it work, all that stuff. This is not going to be super advanced at all, but even the folks I know that are like researchers at labs, when I explain this way, they're like, Heaton, this makes sense, and you're right. That's the best I can get from them is saying I'm right about something because they're researchers and they train AI and all that kind of stuff. So I stress test my simpleton, so to speak, concepts with those folks so that we can all kind of understand this stuff and all that. So you can ask questions anytime during the session also, and we'll have plenty of things at the end. I know I say this is not advanced, but the whole point of these sessions is anyone, whether you're advanced, intermediate, beginner, whatever about any of this AI or topics, you're going to get something out of this, I promise. And if you don't, you can always ask questions and then you'll get more out of it. So what is an agent? An agent is basically a model in a harness. And you're already using agents. If you're using ChatGPT, you're using an agent. If you're using Claude, you're using an agent. If you're using Copilot, you're definitely using an agent. So basically, in general, what an agent means is it's like the same model, usually, different harnesses, and completely different results. And I know I use model in the singular. I'm doing that to not overcomplicate it. But if I were to really push it, and some people have pushed it, it's like, well, what does it mean when you have this or that connected or when you can choose models? Okay, it's models with the parentheses S. That's fine. Just think of that in your head if you're worried about, oh, how do different models fit in? They do. It's just models with a S, basically. Okay. So here's kind of an important way to think about it. I know we have local language models, AI, essentially is what we're calling it, these models. And we have to remember that the model only does one thing. It, you give it words, it gives you words back. And yeah, you could say some of them will make images and all that. Fine. You give it words, it gives you images back. Cool. But even that is not really the model doing it. It's all the stuff around it. So what it doesn't do, it doesn't open your files, doesn't search the web, doesn't connect to your apps, and it can't go away and work on something for 20 minutes. And it also doesn't hold memory. So I think this is really an important distinction. A model, you give it words, it gives you words back. That's the way you want to think about model. It doesn't do all these other things that the AI agents do. And hence why this is my explanation for what an agent actually is. It's a model plus a harness. You can replace the word harness with software. So you can say it's just a model plus software. And I think that's the big unlock and insight that I have for you today on a very simple level. Then we're going to dive in deeper from this. So if you have any questions, want me to stress test this, go for it. I've stress tested this with so many people now because I wanted to make sure that I had a common understanding of this, that other people, no matter how advanced they were, they would accept it because that's huge. And then on the other side, folks who kind of need to understand this stuff because either we're building them, using them, or just simply curious, we need a way to think about this. So an agent is simply a model plus a harness. Harness is just software. So that's what that really means is the software is wrapped around the model and it's doing things. Okay, so you're probably wondering, okay, what does that really mean? So what does a harness actually do, right? Harness actually does a number of things. So it'll make sure the harness is the thing that makes sure that it has, that the model can essentially access all your stuff. This could be files, could be tools, could be any of your stuff, whatever's considered that. If it's in another app, all that, that's essentially what one big piece of what a harness is doing. Another thing a harness does is it actually holds the memory. So what's happened so far, that's part of the harness. And then it also runs the model over and over again until the work is done when you need it to do something more automated or recurring or what have you. And we'll dive into all of this. I just want to set the stage of what a harness is, because at the end of the day, harness is a bunch of software that does a bunch of things. Just like old school SaaS, you could replace SaaS and harness and you're good, as long as you're not counting the AI and the model part of it. And then last but not least, it sets limits on what it can do and can't do. What can it touch for that call? What can it touch at all? All those things are essentially embedded in the software that we call a harness now. Okay, so I know I said this before. I can't stress this enough, but all these things and more are you using an agent. So it doesn't really matter if you're using Claude Cowork, you're using an agent. Using Claude Design, you're using agent. Using ChatGPT and basically any of the features in there, deep research, browsing, all that, you're using an agent. So an agent is really what we've all been using. That's why I like to describe it like this. And just for a quick side note, for anyone that's like super curious about this, the folks at Anthropic, Claude had a leak a while ago, last year or sometime, and it really shed light on the idea that Claude is really just a harness. And I don't want to say that like just a harness, but it's fun to kind of say it like that. But Claude is just a harness, and then they have their models. And actually, folks probably don't know this, but because that was essentially leaked, it was their system prompt and a bunch of stuff that was leaked. Someone might know what it was exactly. I forgot. But all that stuff that was leaked is actually why OpenClaude exists. Because the creator of OpenClaude basically pointed the AI at that and said, build that. And then it built this. Again, I'm butchering it, but this is the story I heard and it sounds about right. And that turned into OpenClaude. So it was Claude making OpenClaude via studying Claude, because Claude stuff leaked. And so OpenClaude is an agent. That's kind of what I'm trying to get to. A Hermes agent. It's called Hermes agent. It's an agent. So, but what it really means is those things are useless. They're just harnesses if they don't have a model involved, obviously, because without a model, those things don't work at all. So that's kind of another explanation of what an agent is. Without a model, it doesn't work. So it's software that doesn't work without a model is an agent. So that's another way to think about it. But I just wanted to give a quick history lesson there, because like that history, I think, is really important for everyone to understand why we call them agents, why I'm using the word harness, and how this all fits together. Okay, so another interesting thing, and this is why it doesn't make sense for me to say models plus harness, because when you switch out these models, the harness is actually what's doing the heavy lifting, not the model. The model is just as smart or whatever as it is. So that basically means that the model is essentially largely, and again, we can get into details where it's not, but in vast majority of cases, it's just interchangeable and you can swap one for the other. And the harness is actually what makes Claude different than ChatGPT. And that's why the same model can feel off in one sort of harness and not in another. And it's simply because of this idea that the harness, the software, is actually what's impacting how the model performs and all the other stuff that it does more than anything else once we are using it, post-training and all that stuff, of course. So I think this is a very dramatic and good example, but it's basically different harness, unique agent. That's kind of what you get out of this. So this is just a way to show that, hey, you can choose all these different models and all these different products. And yes, the models will be the same. You can even do the same prompt, but because it's a different harness, you get a different output. So the harness is actually now, the consensus is the harness is actually essentially dictating what goes on with the models more than the models themselves. That's why you can have very strong variations between different harnesses now, regardless of the model. Okay, what shapes the output? So I think that's one big piece that people sort of mistake. They think the AI is shaping the output. So when you think about this, and I'm going to explain all these 5 things, but a prompt is only one of the things you can change when it comes to the output. Skills, plugins, loops, all those things also shape the output. And then, of course, what tools it has access to and how long it runs is another piece of the puzzle. These are all things that are essentially controlled by the harness once you prompt. So this is kind of how it works. It's basically skills, tools, plugins, how long you let it run, and of course, your prompt. The most important thing is all what gets thrown into an agent, and that's essentially all the stuff that feeds an agent. Then you realize this, once you realize kind of what's going on here, is that most people only change one of them, which is usually just the prompt. And so when you're trying to make working in a harness, let's say ChatGPT or Claude, and you keep getting poor outputs, you just keep trying to rewrite and rerun these outputs, right? And as you do that, you're just changing the prompt. And so at some point, you're probably wasting time because you keep getting poor outputs and all you're doing is iterating the prompt when there's all these other pieces of the puzzle. And I think that's important just to understand. And I've done sessions on skills and stuff like that, which we can get into. But basically, there's a skills 101 in my library. So just as a refresher for anyone that's been here before, when I think about this, a skill is simply one task. And so a skill, the system of a skill lets you teach an agent one task the way you do it. It's written once and then reused every time. Of course, you can edit it, but the whole idea is this. And in Skills 101, I talk about even making your own skills, finding skills, all that stuff, because we all can do that. The tools are very easy to use now on being able to do all that. Okay. So then recently, a couple weeks ago, I did plugins. So a plugin is a whole job. So usually it's a bundle of skills and tools kind of built together, designed to essentially do an entire job for you. Just yesterday, actually, a plugin spec was announced. So if you ever watched that plugins 101 thing I did, or you were there, I was complaining about how there's no standardization for plugins. Well, as of yesterday, there's now standardization happening, which is amazing because that means that when we build plugins, we don't have to build them for 5 different products. We can ideally build them once and they will work across the tools. I'm sure it's still going to take some time to get there, but that's a big, awesome piece. But again, what is the difference between a skill and a plugin? A skill does a task. A plugin does an entire job, which essentially is a set of tasks. And then loops. Okay, I did a loops one too. So in the library, there's a loops 101, which is another big piece of the puzzle now, which is basically it gives the agent a goal and then it keeps working and checking its own work until the goal is met. And one thing I just want to remind people of is a loop, it does not really recur. It really is a self-improvement loop, and it does stop once it has hit the bar. So a loop and an automation are actually different things. A loop can be automated if it's running on a trigger or some kind of recurring basis, just to be clear. Just because someone says loop does not mean it is automated. It does mean that it is iterating against some goal until it gets to the goal. It does stop. All right. So now let's talk about how I would map exactly how, when your output isn't good enough, what you can do about it. And essentially, in short, you're actually looking at the inputs to fix the output. So I'm going to spend a little time on this one because it's actually the last main slide I have today. And so if you have any questions about this or anything else, we're coming up to that in a few slides in a few minutes. But I wanted to spend time here. So this is kind of what I've deciphered. Essentially, let's go issue by issue and fix. So if the answer is wrong or shallow, it's actually usually the model. And that means you're using a lower model by accident or on purpose, whatever. So just look at the model and try the same prompts or workflow with a different model, a more powerful model or a different model, powerful or not, doesn't matter. Just try a few and you usually will find better results most of the time. Okay, second issue. If the answer ignores how you work and it's like doing all this stuff or doing things that you didn't really want it to do or align with it, that's usually a missing skill. The more progressive version is if it was an entire job you're doing, so to speak, then it would be a missing plugin. But first, you usually start with skills. So if it's ignoring how you work, it's not repeating something you had done before or that you would expect it to do because of memories or whatever your expectations are, it's likely a missing skill or a skill that you need to improve or fix. Okay, if it stopped too early, okay, that's usually the tools and connections. What that really means is it could not continue because it was unable to do something, usually because it did not have access to something. And I'm making this simple on purpose because this is the type of stuff that we can all sort of take home and use and really, think through as we're using AI. And then last, it couldn't reach something it needed. Again, that's usually the loop or the amount of time you gave it. Because remember, these loops have a goal, and sometimes a goal might not be met, but it might not have the proper sort of amount of time to reach it, or something about some of the things that we talked about prior. But usually, if it can't reach the end of something, it has something to do with the loop and amount of time that it was given. The loops are not something I see a lot of people running, but I did want to mention it because I did talk about loops. And the loops are really powerful because you don't need to babysit it for it to hit its end goal. But when it doesn't, usually that means that you didn't give it enough time, or some of the other three things above might be true as well. So, yeah, this is kind of the main piece now that you understand what an agent actually is, how you can essentially diagnose issues that you have. And these are the kind of diagnosis we would do if we're building a product that is an agent. This is actually exactly the kind of stuff we try to do. We try to, pop up our agent really quickly or our chat, and then we try to probe it and ask it a bunch of questions to watch it fail. And then we're debugging something like this. Is it not connected properly to the tools? Is it missing some kind of skill that it needs to pick up, or it should? Is there a plugin that we need to build out? Things like that are kind of the things that we do when we debug, when we're building actual agents for our products. All right. So I always like to talk about what you can do. Of course, you can identify which agents you're already using. I think that when I explain this to people, I think it's a little surprising sometimes that, oh, I'm already using an agent. Yep, you're already using an agent by my definition, which I think is the best definition I can come up with and the one everyone understands. You obviously want to pick a task where the output is kind of annoying or disappointing to you. And then not last but not least, but like, then you can basically figure out where the input is actually at fault, or in which part of it, and then change one thing and see if you can make it better. And again, that's just the workflow that you can imply from everything I said of like how you can improve your own sort of outputs with AI. And that was my main sort of goal today with Agents 101. It wasn't to dive into the full on explanation or how to build these or anything. It was really focused on so everyone here at least can understand exactly what an agent is, what the components are, and then essentially how to debug your own outputs so you get better outputs.